Alright, so I have a few topics. I guess I'll start with Moose's topic. So Moose asked, when can you play aggressive in lane? Or when do you have to play passive? So as ADC, because this is mostly about side lanes, I'm assuming, Moose, not much about mid. Either side lane or both? Mostly solo. Okay, so as solo, at the start, were you here? I'm more confused. Alright. Were you here when I went over solo last week? Yes, okay. So when you start, and I'm gonna explain it when you're starting blue. So you, let's say you're both starting at your blue buff, and you both go to lane. The wave is already gonna be fighting by the time you get there. And Finoke refers to this as minion RNG. If one of your minions dies before you get there, you will not hit level 2 of the first wave. And if they have all their minions, then they will. So this is a first point you should take note of and you should pay attention to. Because obviously you don't want to be standing in their wave when they hit level 2 and there is no way for you to hit level 2 anytime soon. So in that scenario, you would have to play passive because you know they're gonna hit a big power spike and you won't just yet because you need to wait for the next wave to come. So that is at the start of the game. Generally, when you play passive or when you want to play aggressive, if you have the waves and let's say you're Wukong, so you just stand like in the middle over here, losing light or blue. You stand like in the middle over here because you want to hit the entire wave with your thingy, with your Jingu Bang. And if they, let's say they are, whatever, Guan Yu, and Guan Yu just wants to poke you out, he's gonna outpoke you and he has some sustain to help with this. But your wave clear is most likely gonna be better, so you need to focus on your wave clear. And maybe you can interrupt him with a stun with your tiger form if he uses Stellar's Assault. But you mainly want to focus on your wave clear because the advantage of doing that is you're gonna clear his wave while your wave is still there, and then you have minions helping you fight if he still wants to fight you, which he shouldn't be doing. But you can do other stuff. You can do totem, you can do your blue, you can rotate, you can back, whatever. Well, he doesn't have the option because if he wants to rotate or back, then he's gonna miss his wave. So he doesn't really have a choice but to stay in lane. So you can play aggressive. As a general rule, when you're gonna gain something out of it. So you could look like in this scenario, the Guan Yu. If the Guan Yu would be ahead, he can poke you out a lot, and he can use the Stellar's Assault on you, not have to worry too much about the wave clear anyway because he has some sustain. But if there is no real goal, then there's not really any point of poking you out. Like if you're already gonna back, if you back at like 300 HP or 1000 HP, it doesn't really matter as long as you don't die. But if you just came back to lane and you got poked and now you're half health again and your blue is coming up but you're half health, so it's kind of hard to defend, then that's a big advantage for the enemy team. And the advantage came because they played aggressive. But if your blue is down and you just back and nothing is up, then who really cares? It's the same in duo where you want to fight over something and just, I mean, it's the same everywhere basically. You don't just want to fight because there's an inherent risk that you can die. But if there is nothing to gain and just taking a risk, where the only thing you can gain is a kill, which is like a few hundred gold, and maybe push one wave on the tower. But if, let's say, you're other side and you, so your camps are down, like this is down, totem is down. Hi Eldo. So if your buffs are down, but their buffs, like everything is still up, you might look to play aggressive so you can try to gain an advantage. Because what you can do, hi Elf, what you can do is try to poke them out. And let's say the enemy has to play safe and he's like a third HP. So he's kind of low, not really in any risk of dying as a solo laner because he's kind of tanky. But he's kind of low, it's difficult to contest things, and if he does contest too much, then he might die. So at this point, you can look to invade the blue buff. And either the enemy gives up his blue buff, or he tries to contest, and then you should be able to win a fight pretty easily if he's that low. If you're like 50% HP or more, you should be able to win any fight at that point, basically. So in this situation, the enemy would have to, let's say they have teleport, so they would back immediately and teleport back to their tower. At that point, they lost a blue buff. You are still 50% HP, but now they are full health. So now they have the advantage and the roles kind of turn around, where now their blue buff is down because you just did it. But now maybe the totem came up, maybe your blue buff came up, and now they can try to turn it around. So it's kind of like, what do you call it? Like a pendulum, and the pendulum swings, and it's a kind of everybody takes turns of being aggressive. Another big factor in playing aggressive is power spikes, mainly in items. The first big power spike in any game is gonna be in solo. That is gonna be hitting level 2 when you come to the wave of top 2, because you just have double the abilities of the enemy if they don't hit level 2 yet. So that's an obvious big advantage. The next big advantage you're gonna have is level 5 when you get your ult, which most gods are gonna have some kill pressure at least. Gods like Nike only have kill pressure when you're out of position because they're slow. But someone like Guan Yu might have a lot more kill pressure because his ult actually does a lot of damage. So that's a second big power spike. After that, your first back when you hit boots. If you get boots before the enemy solo laner and they don't have any items yet, that's also a big advantage because it gives movement speed, so you can chase them or run away. It gives a lot of power, so you're just gonna do more damage. And they can't really run away from you because of the movement speed. And whatever else you decide to build. Maybe you build attack speed even if you're playing someone like Amaterasu or an assassin. So items, boots is the first one, and then after that whatever you build, Soul Eater, Forge Shield, Sledge, I don't know. Whatever you decide to go, any tier 3 item is going to be a big power spike. Because most tier 3 items have a powerful passive to go along with the stats on the item. So it's more than just 50 power, 300 health, whatever you're building. That's why tier 3 items are also way more powerful than multiple tier 2 items, as a side note. So that is a reason to play aggressive, abusing your power spikes. Another one is if you have, let's say you invaded their blue buff, so their blue buff is down and it's not coming up anytime soon yet. You might want to play a bit more aggressive just to force out some abilities. You're not gonna go too insane in trying to fight them, but you will have 10% CDR where they don't, so you have your abilities up a bit more often. And you have all the mana regen, so you can use your abilities more freely. And if they want to fight you back and not just get beaten up and do nothing in return, then they have to use their mana. And since they don't have a blue buff, they need to be very careful what they use their abilities on. Because if they don't have mana for the wave, then the wave is gonna get pushed into tower, and then they're gonna snowball, or you're gonna snowball out of control, rather. And a final point is probably when the jungle, but you kind of want to wait for your jungler. Because if it's something like a Thor, he can dunk down from like in the fire giant pit, like over here. He can dunk all the way to the lane. But if it's someone like a Nemesis, then they're gonna have like a dash and a blink. It's pretty short range. So you want to be ready to engage, but not engage too soon, so you don't give away the gank. Does that answer your question? And do you also want me to go over a similar thing in ADC or not? I think ADC is more clear. Yeah, ADC is simpler. It's basically the power spikes, and you need to be more wary of the jungler since you're so squishy. So the jungler is more of a threat to you as an ADC than as a solo laner. Although he's a dual lane main now. Amazing. The second suggestion somebody had for a topic was how to turn around bad situations. So it's kind of a shame that he's not here right now because it's a very broad topic. But as in lane, like let's say you're in dual lane and you're behind, you want to get, like, basically your goal is to get as much farm as possible, and ideally you would also deny them some farm if you can. If you are very far behind, it's going to be very difficult to do that. But if you're like only a bit behind, then you can try to abuse the minions more. So let's say you are behind in dual lane, but all the other lanes are fine, like your mid is fine, your jungle support is fine, solo is winning. You can look to get the back camps more often, just so you can get a bit of extra farm to help you catch up. Make sure your buffs don't get invaded, because if they get invaded, you're just gonna get further and further behind. If you know the enemy ADC likes to invade your buffs on cooldown, maybe you can call over your jungler and gank him there so you can even get a kill on him and get back into the game that way. Also, try to rotate to oracles often, because that's just another point of farm you should try to get whenever you can. But in general, in lane, what you want to do is, if the enemy is there, like let's say the wave is just pushed up like to the middle of the map, boom, perfect, and the enemy is just sitting here freezing the wave because he knows he's ahead, and he's not gonna push it because he knows he can take a fight whenever you push up. You can, what I should do first of all is just like either you come when you're doing purple, for example, you come from base, you just go over here and you wait like over here so he doesn't see you. And the reason he shouldn't be seeing you is because if you're not there in the lane, which you should be thinking at this point because he doesn't see you, if you're not there, then there is not really any point in freezing. But you might as well clear the wave and go do buffs, maybe invade the buffs on this side in this scenario. Because you're not doing anything sitting here as the Chaos side ADC. And if you don't see the enemy ADC in lane, you might as well just push his wave on the tower and go do something else and get more farm for yourself. So don't let yourself be seen. If you are not that far behind, you can try to push up. And if they're just standing there, you can like just stand back in your wave and just like shoot at him. Try to poke him out a bit. Because if he's gonna fight back in this scenario where he's standing at the melee minions and you're standing at your archers, whenever he attacks you, he's gonna pull all your minions onto him and aggro them. But whenever you shoot him, maybe you pull the melees depending on where exactly he's standing. Or maybe you just pull nothing and you just poke him for free. You can also stand on this side. And so you shoot him like this. But then you will guarantee be pulling the melees because you're always going to be in range of them. But he can't shoot back because he's going to hit your melees. So it's kind of situational and you need to look at what you want to do. Especially when you have like 3-4 items, just a few auto attacks should be enough to force him back. Just be careful that he can't just, like if he's Honor, he can't just jump on you and kill you immediately when you push up. Other than that, obviously jungle ganks are always gonna help. If you are behind, also getting wards over here can be good, because if you know the enemy jungler is not close to you and you see the enemy ADC at their purple buff, and you can just wait over here. And especially if you have just ward again forehead, exactly. If you, let's say you're like, the best characters for this would be Hoi or Anhur. If the enemy ADC just walks like this to lane, like a normal ADC would, if he doesn't know you're there, you can just impale him into the wall or ricochet into the wall and hit him twice with the ricochet. Just so you can deal a lot of damage to him quickly. And in that case, he's already gonna be low, so it's gonna be very difficult to fight him even if he's ahead. So unless he's like really far ahead, where it would just be impossible to do anything. But unless that happens, then there might always be a good start to a fight. So he would just have to jump to his tower, jump to his tower, or like depending on what god he is, jump or maybe Heim teleport or whatever. And at that point he's half health roughly. You should be full health. Maybe then you can freeze a wave. Maybe you can invade this, and if you see him, that would be in blue. So you could maybe invade this, and if you see him walking up to the lane, then maybe you can go around this way and cut him off. Although you need to be careful for the minions, so you don't fight him in the minions too much, because then he might still be able to turn around the fight. But generally you could just freeze the wave. Or push the wave and then invade, because then if he tries to stop you, he's gonna not be able to get the wave that's pushing here. So he would give up a lot of farm to stop you from getting the harpy. Another thing, if you wanna turn around bad situations as a team, like late game, let's say after 20 minutes. Well, actually, for other roles, early game, it would be similar to this, like just try to get more farm get some rotations from your teammates is a general principle. Try to get this farm on cooldown, so you're just getting more farm as a team than the enemy team is getting. This one as well. Try to, as a jungler, try to be ready for invades. Like maybe your solo and mid can come over here. Mid can come over here, support as well. Maybe ADC can come over here. So you're not giving up too much farm to the enemy team. But as a team late game, if you are behind, it's very difficult to turn around the fight because you're not relying as much on one person making mistakes. Whereas one person making a mistake in lane can lose the entire lane. But one person making a mistake in team fights, obviously, if it's a massive fault, then they will just lose the game of it. But if it's a small mistake, then you're not just gonna win off it instantly. So, late game, you're more reliant on making better calls and maybe doing things they're not prepared for. So maybe you can split push a lot, even though it's frowned upon. It definitely helps if you're behind already. The issue with split pushing is you're gonna fight a 4v5 on the other side of the map. So if the ADC is pushing here and he's getting towers, that means on this side of the map it's gonna be a 4v5 and they might get fire off it. So you would split push as the ADC in this scenario. Maybe you're a Churner box you can ult in, that would be ideal. But even if you're not, then you would split push. And your team would have to give up Fire Giant, because if they do try to contest, it's likely that they lose the fight because they're 4v5 and then they still lose Fire. So your team would kind of just try to delay the enemy as much as possible, while you are getting more gold and experience for your team on this side of the map, where the enemy team is just kind of dancing around Fire Giant, not achieving anything. Another thing you can do is try to get picks. If people are pushing out lanes by themselves, or maybe like people are at Fire Giant, but the mid is getting red buff, so he's alone, maybe you can try to capitalize of that and try to get a pick on the mid. This requires wards, obviously. So you would have to prepare for this situation, try to get some wards in on the buffs. Or maybe... Thanks, Halo. Or, yeah, get some wards in. What was I gonna say? I lost my train of thought now. God damn it. Now I really forgot what I was gonna say. Oh yeah, even if you like don't get a kill, if you can get some...
Hello. I'll mute myself.
Even if you can get like some relics, especially on the mid and hunter, like if you can get some of their relics down, then they might be a very easy pick to engage on for your support or your solo laner, maybe even your assassin, your jungler. So you didn't get the kill immediately, but getting their relics allows you to win the fight the next time. You can always go for steals on Fire Giant or Cold Fury or Pyro. But if you try to go for a steal, don't commit too much, because if you're behind and you try to steal and you fail and then you die, then you lose the game immediately. But if you have things like a Ra ult or Rama snipes, you can try to steal it and not be in too much danger while doing it. And then they just run away if they get it, or even if they don't get it. They just run away. Another thing I was gonna say. Oh yeah, if like let's say the enemy team is on Fire Giant, so they're all there, and you're all grouped up like over here in this area. What you can also do is, if the enemy is pulling fire, they're gonna be taking a lot of damage consistently for the Fire Giant. So you don't really want to engage on them until the Fire Giant gets low. And at that point, they would have, like, I don't know, the tanks would probably have like 80% health. And squishies might even a bit lower, like 65% health. So what you want to do is you want to wait as long as you can, and then you engage on the enemy team while they are lower. And even if you don't win the fight, your goal is just to have them drop the Fire Giant so they can't do it anymore and they run away. Because if they drop the Fire Giant, now they are low, you should still, or low, they're like not as healthy, and you are still roughly full health. And at that point, they would probably, at least one or two people would have to back. So you can probably try to push some towers, get some more farm, maybe invade some camps. It's a little thing, but it will help you get ahead a little bit. If oh yeah, as if they are backing, like let's say you just push the enemy team off the Fire Giants and like you see their ADC backing, you don't really want to start up Fire Giant yourself because it's still gonna be a 4v5 and they would still be ahead. So now you are the one taking damage from the Fire Giant, and then they just have to delay for the ADC to get back to the fight. And then they have the big advantage again. Plus the advantage that you are now also low, or well, not as healthy. And their ADC is full health again. So then they would have the advantage twice. And at that point, you're at a. It's going to be very difficult for you to stop them doing fire. Because at that point, if you commit, then they might just turn on you and kill you and maybe end the game. Another way to get back. I think the main thing in. I mean, team fights, you just always want to play as best as you can, of course. But you might try to risk your team fight a bit more and maybe go more all in on the enemy hunter or the enemy mid, whoever the problem might be. So you just try to dive them harder and kill them and try to win a fight that way. It's risky, but if you're far behind, it might be a good call. Because if you don't do anything, you would lose the game anyway. So yeah, try to all in them and maybe kill them quickly and then win a fight that way. Might be another call, but it's kind of desperate. If you are playing an aggressive support, let's say my bow Naja, and you're pushing harder than the other duo lane and your wards are gone, how would you advise to deal with a gank? File it, CC and run. I'm assuming you mean like early game level 2, 3, something like that, Aldo. So, if you are pushing up in duo, I'm gonna assume you mean like level 2, level 3, something like that. Can correct me if I'm wrong. And I'll say you're like over here. And they're like under that tower. Like that. There's not. I mean, you can stay up that far. You should always. I mean, in theory, you should always be looking at the mirror, although, of course, you can't always be looking. But your mid should be calling it if the jungler and mids are going in the left jungle. What? Going in the left jungle. And at that point, you can back off. If you see them in mid, or maybe they're even going over here, so they're nowhere close to you, you can look for the invades Or you can look for the, should be in blue, look for the invades or look for the oracles. Because just standing like over here, it doesn't really, there's not really any benefit to it. And you're just being way more susceptible to ganks when you're standing over there. What you can do is just stay this pushed up and then clear the next wave immediately. Clear it immediately at that tower line. And then you have more time to do the invade or maybe go to your camps. But in general, I don't think you should be pushed up too much if there is not really any goal. Especially early game, the wards are not that important because the mid should be able to keep track of where the jungler is for you. And ideally, you should also look at the minimap and see where he is. Or see where he's going. But if you do get ganked, you are gonna have to run. Because it's gonna be a 2v3. You're gonna, like, unless their dual lane is really low, you're gonna have to run. Because it's gonna be a 2v3, and if their wave is like over here, so it's gonna help fight for them, but your wave is only gonna be down here. So their wave is not even close to being able to help. So it's a 2v3, and they have a minion wave. So there's not really any scenario where you can win a 2v3, like I said, unless they're really low in duo. And then it would basically be a 1v2 because their duo can't really help. So yeah, if you're playing Najai, you have the advantage that you can wing toss them and slow them all while you get movement speed from it. What do you think about using your escape ability to engage as an ADC? Too risky, or in some cases it's worth it? Again, one, you should know where the jungler is, because the amount of times I've jumped in and then I have Thor dunk on my head, it's pretty depressing. So know where the jungler is. If you know, like, the people you should keep track of in your head as an ADC are obviously one, the enemy ADC, two, the enemy jungler, and three, the enemy support. So you should try to keep track of those three people at all times, or as much as you can at least. And this is something you learn as an ADC. Like, you see them in mids, and then they're missing your mid and call anything, so you know, like, okay, if Thor comes over, then it's gonna take him like, well, I don't know the exact time. I more have a feeling for it. It's gonna take him like 10 seconds to run over to Cold Fury, like 3 seconds to go up in the air, and like 2 more seconds to dunk down on my face. So I might get ganked in 15 seconds because Thor is missing. And this is something you learn. Like, you get a feeling for it. But if you know where the enemy support and jungler are, then you can use your ability to engage as an ADC. Like your escape, your jump. Obviously, you want to keep in mind how the fight is gonna turn out. Because if there's nothing to gain, like I said in solo, I don't think you were here yet, although. But if like everything is down, like let's say even gold is down, so there's really nothing up, then sure you can jump in, but what is the point? And at that point, you might as well just clear the wave and then go do your own camps. Because there's not really any benefit of jumping in, it's just a needless risk. But if you know it's up and you know you can take the 1v1 and win it, then sure you can jump in and then maybe you can try to invade the Harpy, invade the purple. Maybe even do Gold Fury if the team is ready for it. And if you get a pick somewhere else. But yeah, does that answer your question? Mainly keep in mind where the enemy team is. And then you can do it. is using the dash to engage. Okay, if it gives you a kill, even if it might kill you, and one is trading worth it. So Moose, you mean like let's say your ADC and you see the enemy ADC is low, but you know the jungler is coming, so you jump in, but you know you're gonna get traded for the kill, like something like that. Basic rule: if you are behind the enemy you are trading for, then it's worth it because you are gaining more gold for the kill than the enemy is getting for killing you. The second thing to keep in mind is, again, like let's say the example in duo, you jump in because you know you'll get the kill, but you also know the enemy Thor is ganking you, so you're dead if you jump in. And if you jump out, then you get out because the enemy ADC is too far away. So, are any of these camps up? Because if in this scenario you die, the enemy ADC dies, but now there is an enemy jungler in your lane, like let's say over here, and all these camps are up, or any of these camps that are up are free to take for him. So if your camps are up, then you're gonna lose them. Even if these are up as well, he's always gonna try to prioritize your camps to get the invade if he can, because those are better to clear, because you're taking away the farm of the enemy team, or your team in this scenario. So keep in mind how much you are worth. Keep in mind what the potential loss is while you are dead. So getting your camps invaded, maybe even if your mid is also dead, you don't want to jump in because you need to stay alive. Because if you die, then Gold Fury is at risk. So keep in mind who else is dead and what else they can gain of it. If you're even and when your wave is pushing hard and the enemy ADC would lose 2 waves, while you only lose like 3 minutes, I guess it's worth it too. Yes, because like you said, you are losing a half a wave and they are losing 2 waves. And if you're even, then the goal difference is like nothing. So you would, I mean, they would lose like 150 more goals than you would. Although again, keep in mind that now there is nobody to. It's all in this scenario. It's pretty extreme, so it's always going to be worth it to die. But losing these 2 camps would almost make up for a wave and a half in, because not only like these camps count double for being invaded, because not only are they getting farm, they're also taking away farm from you. And since you died, and I'm assuming unless you trade perfectly with the enemy ADC, somebody else is gonna, like in your example, somebody else would almost certainly be there to trade you out. So again, there would be a jungler there, a mid there, although a mid would have to go back to lane. But if there's a jungler there, then again, he's gonna soak up some of the farm and then maybe invade again. So you would be ahead in lane a lot, but some of your leads would be because the enemy jungler is taking the farm in a way, so the jungler of the enemy team would gain an advantage. That is also another point to keep in mind, because you don't really want to give the jungler too many kills. Like, if you're getting ganked as ADC, it would be better for you to kill the jungler and die to the ADC than kill the ADC and die to the jungler, if that makes sense. Because you're gonna have a harder time in lane in that scenario when you die to the enemy ADC, but your team is gonna have a better time because their jungler is not as fat as he would be otherwise. So overall, it's better, although for you personally, it's worse. If that makes sense. And I know you can't always choose who you die to, but if you have the option, the jungler is probably the worst person to die to. Especially early game, because he has so much impact. Now, support is best, yeah. Like jungler worse, then probably mid, then solo ADC. It kind of depends on what gods they have. Because some fat solo gods are really hard to deal with, and some fat ADC gods don't really care too much about the kills once they get far enough into their build. But yeah, support is always going to be the best to die to. Because they're not going to deal that much more damage. And they're always going to be behind. It's just going to be a bit less behind, but it's still going to be behind. Now for Mystic's question. Playing passive. Or how to play passive and how to play for the late game and not just picking Hercules and inslocking him and pressing W all game, which is what it does now, I'm assuming. So if you want to play more for the late game, it's just a different style of playing support. Because you're gonna, let's say you're playing a gap, which is like the ultimate I play for late game and I don't do anything early game example. Early game, you don't really do anything. Just kind of shockwave and hit the enemy for 50 damage and then give a shield. So you're gonna play more passive. The issue with that is you have to react to what the enemy is doing. Whereas if you play Hercules and you hold W, you choose what you do. And the enemy is the one reacting to what you do, which is a lot easier. So, like in lane, you want to have a god that has at least decent clear. So you don't get like pushed out lane completely. Because if you have something like Gabjing Wei, you just have no wave clear early game, and then you just get every camp invaded, you have no pressure. And you fall behind for minute 1. But if you have Obama, he has good clear and he can help you get onto the late game where you will actually be a good support and be useful. So I think the playstyle itself it can be similar to Hercules in a sense that you still want to go all over the map and make some plays. But instead of blink pulling the enemy carries and the enemy mid laners, you're gonna give gap shields to your carries and your mid laners. And yeah, you just play more of a supportive style instead of just running at them. And what you do as a gap or as a, who else would we pick? Like a Sylvanas. What you do is you look for plays on a smaller scale early game. You look for some blocks as Sylvanas, maybe like Blink, Gabbled, one person. And you use a lot of your abilities to get less compared to something like a Hercules or a Horus. But how do I say this? Like you use your abilities, like your bigger abilities, more freely on a single person. Early game at least, because late game you want to ult as many people as you can with either Gab or Sylvanas. But early game blink ulting with either one is fine for one person. Because your other abilities don't have that much impact. And support is OP, that's true. And when those abilities are on cooldown, you just try to go where your team needs you. So if you see the enemy jungler is going to dual lane, you might want to wait it to do it so you can have a gap shield ready for your ADC if he gets store dunked on, get a knock up to disrupt the tower, and things like that. And just try to keep in mind more where the enemy is going and what they want to do. Whereas as Hercules, you just decide, I'm gonna W key at the enemy mid laner until he dies. And then I'm gonna W key at the enemy ADC until he dies. Whereas the more late game gods, you have to play more reactive in the early game. If that makes sense. And also you would try to, what was I gonna say? Yeah, you would try to like be more of a facilitator. Like you split a bit with the mids, then you go to the like whatever, you go to the back ends with the jungler, then you go to blue with the solo laner. Just split a bit with everything, with everyone. Because there's not much you can achieve anyway, so you just try to farm more often. Whereas Hercules, you just run at the enemy more, and you split more with the waves because you want to make plays. You split more farm with the lanes. Does that answer your question, Mystic? Because I feel like I'm still not quite sure. Like it was mainly early game focused, your question, right? And in lane, like early laning phase, as a Sylvanas or a Gap, you just kind of try to focus on the wave clear, because you're not gonna win any fights 2v2 unless the enemy dual lane is really bad at wave clear. But you just try to get your farm as best as you can so you can get to your late game where you can actually have impact and achieve your goals. Because if you try to pick a fight as Gap, you're almost never gonna win any fight early game. Are there any other questions? My question is for next week, since it's basically how to draft. Yeah, next week I'll go over like drafting and what strengths you want in your draft, and like how to draft, what order you want to draft in, things like that. Because if you have like a team comp, it's still very important what gods you want to pick first. It's like its own game. Yeah, basically, because you can get like a big advantage or disadvantage before you even load into the game, just of how you draft it. I saw you typing, Mystic. It's like poker where you decide on your cards. Yeah, in a way. Because you decide what cards you want to show them first. And then you can also kind of bait a reaction you want. Because let's say, a stupid example. Let's say you pick Wa first and then they pick Odin Cerberus. And then maybe you try to counter Odin Cerberus with the rest of your draft. Something like that. It's a bad example, I know. But it's an obvious example. I think that's all the questions for this week. I think so as well. Did I answer your question, Mystic? I saw you typing, but then you stopped typing. I think Mystic went poof. Yeah. Just vanished. Just gone.
Well, someone's asking for me.
Oh, hi. I asked if I answered your question.
I had a question.
How to play for the late game as a support. Like playing more passive.
Yeah, kinda.
Okay.
I'll just have to play more games and try to not tunnel vision as much.
Yeah, I think the main...
We have a peel board somewhere. It's a board where they put a tick every time I remember to peel.
Yeah, I think the main thing early game is just like try to anticipate where the enemy is going so you can react. Because you can't really make plays by yourself as a more late game called like a Gab or a Cappy or a Sylvanas. Cappy can kind of do it.
Yeah, you could definitely do it with Capri. Don't know if I should, but you definitely can.
I mean, you could if you have the opportunity. Like the block and the root, you have some options.
Yeah. Would Kumba fit a nice in between there?
Yeah. Kuma is, he has so much peel, but you can always also use it for disruption in their backline, so you can make some plays.
Don't play him too much, but one of the other